Welcome back to Raised by Giants discussion. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see you guys, any moderators or channel members out there. A quick reminder that super chats and super stickers are available and will be read out live during the show. If you have any questions at all, send in those super chats and I'll make sure those questions get answered. Also, Ryder Ranger channel memberships are available on our a fantastic way to help support the show monthly. And if you become a Ryder Rangers channel member, you get access to bonus episodes weekly and channel members episode. A brand new one just dropped yesterday titled Flying Saucers. If you're a channel member, it should have popped up in your feed, but if it didn't, go to the community tab on the page of the channel and you can find it there. So as some of you may know, my dad recently passed away and his memorial is happening right now as we are live. And I would just like to take a few moments of silence for my dad and how great of an individual he was. Thank you. And with all that down, we have returning guest and friend of the show, someone that I consider a friend that would probably pick up the phone in the middle of the night so I can bounce ideas off of him about remote viewing. Former U.S. Army Intelligence Security Command and Defense Intelligence Agency's top secret psychic spy remote viewer, Dr. David Morehouse. Welcome back to the show. How's it going, my friend?
I'm good. Very sorry to hear about your father.
Yeah, it's been a very rough process and a long couple of weeks. But Dave, it's been a minute since you've been on, my friend. It's good to see you again. How many more TV shows and documentaries have you been part of and filmed since we last talked?
We did 4 last year, and then we're getting ready to do another one in Phoenix, and then we're going to be filming a couple of introductory classes, but those won't be TV shows, but those will just be filming the introductory classes. So there's a lot of prep work and a lot of stuff going on right now. Things are busy.
Yeah, you're always busy. You're always doing something, David. It's good to see you. Sandra, thanks so much. She said for your $7.99 super chat morning, and condolences to you and your family. Thank you very much, Sandra, for your kindness and support of the show. Really appreciate it. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about remote viewing recently, and it's like they just now have heard about it. You know how like things get recycled and regurgitated back to people like it's like it's something new, which is very interesting to me. You know, the recycling of old information into new information, which the community loves to do, and definitely the popular stuff. Now, where people always get this stuff confused, which I think is partially in fault to Russell Targ's Third Eye Spies documentary, that this was all the CIA, right? That it was the CIA that was running these remote viewing programs. I try and correct these people as much as I can, but it seems to just kind of fall on deaf ears. Like I've seen several people over the last 2 months, like the CIA's remote viewing program. This is all the information about the CIA's remote viewing program. I'm like, the CIA never had a remote viewing program.
Well, the CIA had a contract for the development of a determination as to whether or not, it was a sole source contract, and I get sick and tired of reading all the various interpretations of this freaking contract. I mean, it gets me to the point where I could, I might as well stick my finger down my throat. I swear, it's like, for Pete's sake, and they get a different one. It's one of these reasons why I just laugh at every guy that steps up that was part of the program. I don't care if it's Joe McMonagle, Paul Smith, Skip Atwater, Lynn Buchanan, me, anybody who's still breathing that was part of that program. If you ask them what their version of that program was, it's all different. Everybody's got a different story about what it was. And if you go to Targ and Putoff, mostly Targ these days, and and tried to drill down to what his version of the program was, it's a version of the program that is quite frankly just erroneous from the start. And the reason why is this. These guys came out of Stanford University and formed an independent research organization to go after government contracts in particular research areas, which a lot of, places do that. I mean, that's, Paralabs. It's right. These things come out and they just create themselves there because there's a lot of money in government research. And so they
Yeah,
go
there were several research facilities before SRI.
Sure, there were. But what happened was, I mean, you've had SAIC's been around, Paralabs, and a whole bunch of others. But the thing that we're talking about and staying with the remote viewing story was quite simply that the government found out. And how the government found out is still a matter of question, and which is why anybody that turns around starts trying to say that, it came from this source or that source or that source. The truth of it is, the big rumor is that it came in from human intelligence sources. That means that somebody in the Soviet Union or somebody in China, came back and said through their case officers that the Chinese and or the Soviets both maybe were, looking for natural gifted psychics, and they were going to study and explore and research the paranormal to see if they could find a way in which to use these people as an intelligence collection asset within their intelligence services. And when the truth of it is, nobody has any record of that human intelligence source, whoever that might have been. There have been some rumors tossed around out there by a female historian, Ryder Richardson, Annie Richardson, wrote a book called it'll come to me in a moment. I apologize for not remembering it. She is a runner-up for a Pulitzer Prize, smart lady, but she's quoting this German trove of Nazi historical records, which have been attached to this thing called the Nazi Occult Bureau, which was actually not the Nazi Occult Bureau. The Nazis were actually very skittish of the occult, despite all of the popular rumor around that. They were not in favor of it. And this particular trove it's a series of letters that were written, and I've read them. I mean, the interpretations of them, and did some synopses on them for another show that asked me directly that question. And this writer says that the promulgating document that started the US, Soviet, and Chinese psychic war came from this stock of documents. Well, it didn't. It didn't come from there. Now, maybe somebody interpreted one for her that has not yet been interpreted, but the stack of letters that were, found from a U.S. intelligence officer, that's how they found them, comes in 4 categories. One is about just simply their tracing of their Aryan lineage and heritage in Norway. They're called the Norway letters. Then there's another set of the letters which has to do with just chasing outside of Norway and into Europe proper and even into Great Britain, looking for their language, derivatives and sources and branches, and just their Aryan heritage, because that was the whole big, huge thing that Hitler was probing Himmler to try to sort out. Himmler took it into the occult, but Hitler was not part of that and didn't give a crap about that stuff. And I'll tell you more about the evidence of that as I circle back to answer the question for you. So the next part of it was a series of letters that were called, they were looking at other things in other sources in another country, other sources of just the lineage of the Aryan heritage. And then it was actually the third set of letters. I skipped over it. It dealt with dowsing. So it is a series of dowsing letters, and it's talking about the Nazis' use through this research organization that was headed by Himmler, not directly under the responsibility of Hitler. And there's no evidence that Hitler even really knew much about it, or if he knew anything at all about it. They were dealing with dowsing rods, pendulums, and to some degree, astrology. And what they were doing was just practicing with it, trying to perfect it, keeping notes about it, writing about it. Guys were publishing on it. But here's the deal, is that while this organization that had relatively little to any power whatsoever, even though it came under Himmler, was under constant attack by the secret police and the state police and by, this governing organization for the durability of the people and and the propaganda, et cetera. And they were out there. They were any occult evidence or people studying or practicing occult or doing anything that was occult related. The secret police and state police were out arresting them and putting them in prison. You had these guys, not letters from Himmler. You had the guys that worked under Himmler, 2 civilians basically turned into, some sort of SS officer as a civilian, who are then turning around and trying to get these people extricated from prison. They're trying to get them out of prison before they're executed, or that they're put to work in hard labor, sent to a camp, all of their work confiscated and not being allowed back into Himmler's hands or anybody else. Kind of paints the picture for you for what was going on there when there's all this conspiracy and hoopla and bullshit going around about the fact that the Nazis were all involved in the occult. That's
a good way to mystify it, though, and make it all mystical.
Of course. Yeah, of course. There's a really good book called Occultism in Nazism, or The Occult in Nazism. And if you read that book, you can just search by the title, something parallel, that you'll see the guy. It's been around for a long time. It's probably the most definitive work. If you really want to read a truthful work about it that really goes through it, and what they basically say about this is it's all been under-researched and all been overstated and sensationalized, this whole Nazi and the occult parallel. From movies to you freaking name it, it's all been sensationalized. Anyway, this writer says that this is where the promulgating documents came from. Well, I've read them. I didn't find anything that had to do with dowsing rods, astrology, and pendulum work that had anything to do with psychic warfare or anything else. So back to 1970, there's an alleged that human intelligence sources indicated this to the CIA. The CIA then turned around and asked, are we doing anything like this? The director of the CIA, to which the response from Gottlieb and others was no. So they turned around and they let a contract. They will put out a request for proposals, one assumes, and they have to do that under federal contracting. I know that because I am one. So people put back a response to that from, you name it, SAIC, Pear Labs, whoever else was out there. They all said, yeah, we would like to get a piece of this contract, and here's how we would go about this. For whatever reason, the contract was sole sourced to SRI International in Palo Alto, headed up by Targ and put off at the time. Now, the contract was on again, off again. A sole source contract typically goes for 1 base year, followed by up to 5 option years. So 6 years in a contract. I don't even think that the first contract sole source lasted that long. And then it was turned over to something else, funded through another avenue, back and forth. Now, you have to understand that the agency itself could have been doing that, like pulling the contract, pushing it around from the right flank by some other name, some other funding avenue, just to keep it to the point that people didn't know actually what was going on. I would not put that past them. In fact, I think that would probably be a logical explanation for that. But funding came, it went again. It came from other places. Bottom line is they were given at SRI, and it was a contract that was wrought with a bunch of deliverables. But having read it many times and being a contract, I can tell you that I could distill it down to 3 primary deliverables. First one is, can you prove scientifically beyond a doubt that there is a human ability to see something distant in space-time? In other words, ESP, or a psychic ability, clairvoyance, if you want to look at a more appropriate term. clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, clairvoyance. Okay. Is that provable? And that was their first deliverable, which was to come back and say, to the chagrin of every skeptic in the world, they came back and said, yep, it's there and it's real and we proved it and we believe our research. And the CIA then turned around and said, okay, and put in 2 auditing research agencies to go check out their work to say, is their science good? Is their data analysis and their summaries good? Or are there flaws there that we need to know about? And it means that we can't trust their work. Those 2 research agencies did their work. There were some small findings that of corrective procedures, which I would have expected, because if you're the one that has the contract and the other 2 research agencies didn't get the contract, they put a proposal in for it, they're going to try to find something
wrong with it. Yeah.
Of course. So then what they found were minor, and corrective actions were taken or not taken, as the case may be. But their second deliverable in the contract was, can you tell us who is capable of doing this? So we can go find them and mine them like the Soviet is doing and like the Chinese are doing out of their populations. We need to know what we need to be looking for so we can go get them, recruit them, bring them in, train them, and use them, since you've proven that it is a viable capability, this clairvoyance.
Yeah, that's what the Project Syndicate document was all about, and by SRI in 73, was testing to see if it was a viable source of information and if it can be used for intelligence and data collection. But I guess my point here is that just because the CIA funded a program doesn't mean that the CIA ran a program. And that's where people are getting confused.
It is, but the CIA has a big attachment to the program, which is why people can't let go of that. The CIA started this. The CIA got it going for the reasons I so indicated. The third point, the third deliverable was, can you develop a training program for this? Meaning, well, the answer to the second deliverable was, and it was actually verbally reported by TARG many times, as well as in written documents, said, our research has indicated that we have found that this is an ability unique to no one. It is inherent to every human being. Every human being has this ability. And all they have to do to recognize it is to be willing to explore it openly without prejudice. And then, they can see this unfold for them as well. The third deliverable, which was, can you replicate this? Meaning, can you train it? This is the thing that they failed miserably on repeatedly, because these guys are physicists, mathematicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, right? They haven't got the slightest idea how to develop a military training program. And therefore, they failed miserably. And the military was waiting for this. And they failed because they're not educators. They are scientists. They are researchers. They design research programs. They capture data and analyze and log and report on their data findings. This is what these guys do. They don't train soldiers in any way, shape, or form. And they also were, because they couldn't do that, they weren't going to train other people to be capable of doing it. It didn't matter if they worked at the DIA or the CIA or wherever they might have worked. Now, I spoke with Ingo Swan specifically about what happened. And he tried very hard to get Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff to listen to him about his stages, his coordinate remote viewing training program, of which he had utilized many times, taught many people to do this, referenced in Natural ESP, his book, and in other books that he wrote in those years. But he couldn't get these guys to listen to him and do what it is that he wanted them to do. And albeit he was kind in some of his written portrayals of this stuff, I so testified to you that he told me many times that he wanted to take a hammer to Russell Targ's head. And he meant that figuratively, saying he's such a hardhead and he won't listen to what I'm trying to tell him to do, that I just, wanted to beat him for it because it was worthless. Ingo Swann then was given the mission to train U.S. military intelligence personnel, starting with folks like McMonagle, Paul Smith, Lynn Buchanan, Mel Riley, okay, Ed Dames, et cetera, et cetera. I came in way down the road from these people. And I was also not an intelligence officer. I was a special operations, infantry company commander. I commanded an airborne rifle company, airborne rifle platoon, commanded an airborne ranger company and 1st Ranger Battalion, later an airborne battalion. That's what kind of guy I was. I was not one of those guys. I was not like them. I wasn't wired the same way. I didn't think the same way. I didn't plan to be there longer than a 3-year tour. And I was out of there to go back to be with troops and to go to Command and General Staff College. None of that was in the cards for those guys. Most of those guys stayed there well over a decade. They might have left for a small 2-year turnaround tour somewhere and then come back again, but they were there forever. Now, was the CIA in charge of the INSCOM unit? Absolutely not. Did they have input to it? I mean, did they send message traffic and, stay connected to it? Yes, they did. But did they run the program? No, they were not telling a 2-star and a 3-star Army general, meaning Ed Thompson, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, and Bert Stubblebine, who was the commander of INSCOM, a 2-star position. They didn't tell them what to do. That lash up doesn't work. That's nowhere in the inventory where generals are being told by the CIA what to do. That doesn't work. It isn't there. They may be sitting in the same conference room, and they may, in a boardroom like in, the Kennedy Bay of Pigs or in the Kennedy, Cuban Missile Crisis, where you've seen, those kinds of lash ups. Certainly those 4 stars are sitting in there, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Joint Chiefs, not 2-star and 3-star generals, the 4 stars that are over these different agencies as chiefs of staff of Air Force, chief of staff of the Navy, chief of staff, et cetera, right? That's the only lash up that's there with where the agency ever has influence. They sit in the same room around the same table with them, and they make their comments on the intelligence situation. And then others make decisions about what's going to be acted upon based on what the whole total picture is, but nothing. CIA is not in charge of general officers.
Yeah, it just really pisses me off hearing these people talk about these remote viewing programs and they get everything wrong. Even some of the people that were in the programs, and they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, but speak like it's all facts. I mean, I've tried my best to clear up a lot of the common misconceptions about the program, bringing yourself on and others on that, and literally reading through every single document that I could find and get my hands on. But again, it seems to just kind of fall by the wayside. But here's one that we can try and clear up really quickly, and we've already kind of touched on it, so it kind of connected. So one of the things I hear a lot of the times from the doubters of remote viewing, the people that don't believe that it's possible, that don't believe in any kind of psychic abilities, say that remote viewing has never been scientifically proven. What's your response to that, Dave?
Well, that's bullshit, since I just explained to you that it was. That's I'm gonna the very nice definition of somebody that speaks like that is somebody that is ignorant of actual scientific fact. And then if you keep repeating something from an ignorant position in life, then you can be qualified as just fucking stupid. So if you want to be called stupid, then just keep talking like that. It was absolutely proven by the CIA, which was, as I said in my comments, the reason why everybody who does believe in this should be looking at this and being very grateful for the work done during that time and the proof given. I mean, the results of their experiments in a declassified form were even published in the IEEE in March 1976. That's the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers. That's like being published in the Journal of the American Medicine Association. If you're an engineer, it's published there. And it wasn't ripped apart by people because people were looking at it in the 70s and reading it for what it was. It has some disinformation in it that targets the Soviet and targets China, but that's to be expected. But it's still, you see the list of the scientists that were involved in this, that published on this. So to have somebody turn around and say something like that, then I just love to laugh at them. I mean, right smack in their face, because that's just somebody that's parroting what some parent, some peer, or what some priest, or what some scientist who also knows nothing about it might turn around and say, because that doesn't come from direct experiments or direct research or reading and research on their part to determine the truth of the issue. It just ends up them being the individual that parrots what 2% of the population say, which is there's nothing beyond the physical. It's a big popular position to aspire to nowadays, to be a non-believer of anything other than a believer of bullshit and conspiracy. So
yeah, it's definitely say that it's been scientifically proven. I mean, that was the whole goal of the funding of the research at SRI, was to figure out and scientifically determine if remote viewing psychoenergetic phenomenon was real. And they ran a series of tests, and that's how they got the coordinate remote viewing from the Project Syndicate document from SRI in 1973, which is in the beginning was a blind test to make sure if the remote viewer test subjects at SRI weren't getting the information in any other ways, like subconsciously.
Every scientific protocol used in the in the proper layout of the experiment, etc., and the analysis of the data.
And people would know this stuff if they read the documents, right? If they read the documents, but they're lazy and they just don't want to read it.
Like I said, some professor of nothing, one somewhere in high school probably said, that there's nothing to this stuff, it's crap. Or, they stepped up in church and asked the question and somebody said, well, that's not godlike. So no, human beings don't have that ability. Only God has that ability. And then they walk away now going, yeah, there's nothing to this. I mean, there's nothing to this human ability. But hey, let's be honest. Look around at the rise of the con out there that claims psychic ability and all this other stuff. I mean, they're on every street corner at this particular point in time. If you're one of these people that got bilked out of the 1-800 psychic hotline or 900 psychic hotline, and spent $3,000 in a month trying to figure out whether your dog was still alive after it had died, you might, be in trouble with something like that, but are pissed off about it. And I understand that. There's just been so much, BS that accompanies all of this, and it's not talked about in a scientific process. It just becomes these free-for-alls, right? They loop it right in there with ayahuasca and, psilocybin and
DMT.
Everything. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, no, that's not the same thing. And no, it's not the same thing as transmedium work. And no, it's not the same thing as astral projection. And no, it's not the same thing as being a shaman. And no, it's not the same thing as any of the other stuff. It is a military dogma, a protocol. It is a protocol for the extraction of information from the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is tied into something that you might want to call something like the holographic matrix field or the collective unconscious or the Akashic record. I don't care what you want to call it, but it is akin to that. It's actually considered to be like 8-dimensional hyperspace. Okay. But that's a little more complicated to explain, in 2 minutes. So, but if you are truly interested in that, look it up and don't Google it, for crying out loud, For Pete's sake, if you're going to really researching something, get the hell off Google. Oh, no. Okay. Use Google Scholar. Okay. Because at least that'll then take you to peer-reviewed research in the area that you're asking for. And then you can dig down deep into that, or go to the library, and have them look up these research documents for you, get the titles, give them to them, let them pull out peer-reviewed research. But I'll be willing to bet you probably most of people don't know how to read that. But that's okay. Keep at it. ask some questions of other people who do know how to read it, and you can learn how to read it. It's a difficult thing to do. Most of the physicians I know don't know how to read peer-reviewed research, but that's okay. They're still good at what they do. So,
Yeah, and I think some of it, with people saying, "Oh, well, remote viewing has never been scientifically studied." I think that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Whenever the CIA uh, took over the program in '95 and then shut it down, basically saying, and we've talked about it several times on the show before, saying that there wasn't any actionable data that came out of the remote viewing program. And I think that they're taking that statement and obviously not reading all of the documents that prove that remote viewing is 100% real and is a actual ability that everyone has the capability to do. And I think that they're just throwing the whole thing out.
yeah, they're just acting in ignorance.
And then how are also too, Dave, how are we supposed to get the public familiar with these kinds of topics when it comes to remote viewing? I mean, it can be really anything. It can be UFOs, it can be extraterrestrials, which I don't believe that they actually exist, but that's a whole other thing. How are we supposed to get the public familiar with what has been classified as woo-woo topics when the community itself is really at odds with each other? And there's so much mis and disinformation about these programs out there.
I think that, it's a very good question, Ryder, and it has to be answered, I think, pretty simply, which is, we're all endowed with this really wonderful thing called free agency, which means that we have the ability to ask questions and then act upon the answers that we're given, or, based on, what we see to be truth. So if you want to find things out, then stop getting your news on social media, which puts you again into the, that puts you into the ignorance on steroids category. And then stop Googling for your answers, or going to Quora, or going to Reddit or some other place. No offense to people that do, but I'm just telling you, if you really want to know something and know the truth about something, then roll up your sleeves. You're intelligent human beings, or you're not, but most of you are intelligent human beings. Go search and research and read, funded peer-reviewed studies that have a peer-reviewed means that somebody actually looks at it, that's in a colleague to those who have done the work, or maybe a competitor to those who have done the work, and they can pick apart the science if they choose to. But it's a process of reading and following and reading, and it may take you, 6 hours to get the answer to your question of intensive reading and researching to get to it. Or, you can check what's happening on X and go with it from there. Or some other, or TikTok may have your answer for you or something. But if you're not getting my sarcasm is that the whole, what's happened to 2 generations of young people now is they have decided that that's where truth lies. And so, they'll go to that, they'll seek, whatever common ground is there, and whatever process by which people are dressing and, lashing out at others and calling people names and doing all the other things. And they just, they revel and live in that area. They live there for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And then when they come up for air, when people are speaking or trying to speak to them intelligently and trying to inspire and encourage them to use their frickin' mind and go find real answers to things, and stop making your life be an endless process of thumb work on these ridiculous platforms that have been around since 1978 now. There's a direct correlation in everything shitty in our lives to the advent of social media. And there again, I'm not going to sit here and give you all of it. I'm just going to tell you, if you want to know the rise in the murder rate, and that there is in fact multiple studies that have been done, including the one by Pew Research, over time, talking about the direct rise in crime and cybercrime and murder and human trafficking, right? to the advent of social media, that the more there is of it, the more you use it, that the greater the arc of correlation is between those platforms and all the bad things that are going on in our lives. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about it. If you want to know about it, I already gave you one of the research. Go look up the Pew Research. Just read that one and then look at their references and then look at the next one and the next one and the next one and get smart on it, okay? And understand how derogatory it is, and it is has become and is just getting bigger. You're all worried about the wrong things in this life, all of you.
Well, also, research doesn't mean reinforcing your preconceived notions and bias.
No,
right?
it doesn't. Why? No, it does not. Exactly. So, which is very excellent point. Which is why when I say look at peer-reviewed research, it means you're stepping into something based on the title that it says it is addressing, and you won't know. Go past the abstract. Okay. Read what they have done and how they did it and what their outcomes were, and get all the way to the point of their conclusions, and then start to, make some notes in your head or on paper. And I'll tell you what a general once told me after I stepped right in it and said the stupidest thing that I could say. And I was stupid. I made a comment about something in the Vietnam War to this general. He was a 3-star general on the way to the fourth star. He looked right over at me and he said, "You are the most unqualified person to open your mouth about something like that." To which I then felt about as big as a penny stands tall, right? And then the guy says to me, he goes, "Look, you're not stupid, but you're flapping your yap about something you don't know anything about." And he was absolutely right. I probably read 2 books, if that, on the thing that I was drawing as a point, of negativity towards a unit in Vietnam, an American unit in a battle. And what he said to me was, "Here's my advice to you. If you want to progress in this profession and speak like you just spoke, you read 10 books on either side of the argument. And when you've read 10 books on either side of the argument, then you can formulate or are qualified to formulate an opinion as to which you support. But if you're really intelligent, you'll be able to find the highlights and the good points in both arguments, as well as the flaws in both arguments. Then you know what the hell you're talking about. But until that happens, you're just passing hearsay and opinion, just like everybody else."
And that is what I meant by reading other things that doesn't confirm your preconceived notions and your biases already, right? You want to read the other side of the aisle. You want to read what they're talking about as well. So then you can formulate your own opinion properly. When you know both sides of the story, then you have all the information. And when you have all the information, you can make educated decisions.
Even when it hurts, meaning even when you disagree with it. And it's really one of the harder things for you to read. Like, this does not draw a direct parallel to what we're talking about, but back to the Vietnam thing. If you're reading something on both sides of the argument, you're reading critics of what the unit was or why the battle happened, or of the decisions made by American commanders, and then the decisions made by Vietnamese commanders, North Vietnamese commanders, or Viet Cong commanders. All those kinds of things, and all the political wranglings from both South and North Vietnam, et cetera, of what was going on. And then you're reading it all. And a lot of it, particularly if you feel like you stand on one side of the argument or another, is difficult to read. And you have to really surrender this requirement within yourself to be right. That's a difficult thing to do. But if you can master that, even in any way, shape, or form, you'll get along a lot better with other humans. You'll get along better in relationships with other people, because if you give up the requirement to be right, that's really the only time, that love and understanding and intellect and diplomacy can prevail, when you give up that requirement to be right. I'm certainly not perfect at that, and I certainly cannot tell you I've mastered that. But it has certainly been a rule of life that I've carried with me, just behind my eyes for, 55 years of my life anyway.
Well, that was a very profound segment of the conversation. I hope people really dial in on that section. But Anne here says, "How's it going, Anne? Good to see you." She says, "Wackadoos will say that people who peer review scientific papers are in on it. I've seen that a lot, right? Seen that a lot. They'll be like, "Oh, they're a part of the whole operation. They're just it's the blame game. It's to blame somebody and confirm what you're saying."
Yeah, there's a thing that talks about conflict in the Course of Miracles. And I always misquote it, but somebody that's close to me was explaining it to me the other day and saying, that it explains in the Course of Miracles that if you are in constant conflict with everything, that there's a reason why you're in this conflict. And it lays out, why you're in conflict. But the most poignant piece of this was that if you remain in this conflict over long periods of time and ultimately break through to the point that what you consider a version of truth to be made manifest to you shows up, the question is, the really poignant piece of this is then, so what? So what then? Now what happens? And then what happens is, if you don't understand what's being told you there, what happens is you just go find another reason to be offended. So you'll go find something else to be offended by, and you'll just be in this constant do loop of conflict and conflict, self-created conflict, pissed off at everything. And look around at us right now. There's a reason why I just stopped watching the news, 23 years ago. Actually 24 now. I just stopped because I found every time I looked at the news, it didn't matter what channel I was looking at. It didn't matter between the commercials and the talking heads, and the new flavors of lettering and music and other things that were on there. It was just not Walter Cronkite anymore, or any other, or Ted Koppel or anybody. I mean, so I just was like, I'm done with this. And I just went chunk, and I stopped watching it, and I've never watched it since. Never watched it since. And you know what? I haven't been hit by a tidal wave. Didn't walk into any wars, that I didn't know about. And I just haven't been surprised by anything, really. Didn't step into a riot shopping for shoes and going, oh my God, I'm in a riot. If I had watched the news, I would have known there's a riot, and I didn't know. I should have watched the news. So I don't do it. And I don't associate with or listen to or, read from or participate in any of those things that just lessen how I feel about things. I don't want to be part of something that causes me to live in conflict all the time. Life is too short. God, I'm 70 years. I'll be 70 in September. I mean,
You don't look a day over 40, Dave. What are you talking about? But that's kind of what we're previously talking about, though, is social media is starting to turn into the news now. I mean, we have ads running like all the time. I mean, all the streaming services now have ads. Like, you got to pay a premium price to get streaming services without ads. Like, that's like if you had every streaming service, you'd probably be paying for the ad-free version of the streaming service like $300 a month, which is like double the price of original cable. But they realized really quickly that the ads were beneficial and they weren't getting the money that they needed because these streaming services didn't have ads. So now they've just baked in all the ads into the streaming services. It's unbelievable. Amazon just did it. You used to get Amazon Prime for free if you had Amazon Prime delivery service. Now that's not the case. Now anything you watch on Amazon Prime has ads.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another thing, another Pew Research that study that I read recently that was just talking about the fact, that North Americans under 30 years of age, meaning Canada as well, under 30 years of age in a recent Pew Research poll. And their polls are large. I mean, they don't do like 2,000 people. They do like 400,000 people. So in polling 400,000 people or plus, the research came back and indicated that in North Americans under the age of 30, that they believe social media before they believe any other media outlet. Now, I don't doubt that. I mean, I can't, how do you choose the lesser of both those evils? But clearly both kinds of media now are doing their own thing, and they're doing it not because they're trying to inform you. They're doing it because they're trying to inflame you to keep coming to their site to continue to be inflamed. Because why? Because that's what makes money. It goes from old newspaper adages that, murder sells, and husband loves wife does not sell newspapers. So that doesn't sell newspapers. So anything they can do to stir you up and piss you off and get you riled, and again, to keep you in your own conflict, if you can keep you in conflict, then they know that you'll keep staying there. You'll keep going there to be fed, to have something, this insatiable growing human need to be pissed off and in conflict about something, which is not new. It's just on steroids now because of the ease with which you can find things to inflame you and keep you in conflict. Humans have always found a way to stay in conflict about something. I mean, if we didn't, there wouldn't have ever been a war, right? But we always have found for millennia a way to do that. And before we had organized armies that were doing it, we had tribes doing it, everywhere.
Well, not only conflict with other people in other countries, but a conflict within your very being, in direct conflict with yourself. And I think that is very important as well, and that people don't really understand. A lot of this is set up for confusion. It's set up for you not to know what's going on. It's set up for you to division. Is pretty much in not only a division among people, but the division within yourself.
Yeah. I just wish, that the youth of this planet would come back into some focus and understand that they're in conflict with all the wrong things. They're in conflict with all the wrong things. It's like I shared with you, sometime earlier, the largest industry in the face of the planet right now outpaces the oil industry and anything else you can think of is human trafficking. Human trafficking. The U.S. government is easy to say that there's only 27.6 million slaves. 27.6 million slaves. And that's what they're saying is the figure that should be quoted. If you go to Department of Homeland Security, if you go to the FBI, if you go to Department of Justice, if you go to the United Nations, it's right around in there. And the United Nations keeps it low because the United Nations is, supposed to be the big overseeing international governing body that's supposed to be looking out for this kind of stuff. But what we're really saying, you can go to the other sources that are reporting it from in my opinion, a more truthful perspective, because in my opinion, they don't have anything to gain or to lose by putting out that particular figure. However, Department of Homeland Security, to a certain degree, does, as does Department of Justice or the FBI or someone else, because they have to answer to that on some level if that is indeed the fact. I don't know how you can, in your mind, as a government agency, justify 27.6 million slaves. I don't understand that. Now, that's just slaves. That's not talking about people who are being trafficked as human beings for sex or for forced labor or in pedophilia, child sex, all of those things. But now the numbers run upwards of something of like the unofficial numbers, not accepted by the UN or most government agencies, but they run upwards in the neighborhood of somewhere between 70 and 80 million slaves. That's more slaves right now, more slaves, meaning being forced to work or have sex or something else against your will. There are more slaves right now than there have ever been in the history of recorded human history on this planet right now. Now, how did we let ourselves get to this point? How? And the biggest consumer of that through pornography and prostitution, child sex, and also forced labor in various institutions like restaurants. Maybe your favorite restaurant might have dishwashers and floor moppers and other things in there who are there against their will that have been farmed out. You could go to the Department of Homeland Security if you want to get smart on this. They actually have classes, online classes that teach you how to find trafficked humans, how to spot them in a restaurant or in a retail store, and in the retail industry. They teach you how to spot them, and they certify you through about, I don't know, like 12 different courses, online courses for that. You want to get smart and you want to look, you want to help, you want to try to make a positive difference, do that. Or just go get pissed off on X and TikTok and, and chase yourself around and around and set your hair on fire over UAPs or something else. But you're worrying about the wrong kinds of things.
I'm trying to look up the statistics right now on the human trafficking. It's very difficult to find. I have to look a little bit more into it.
Yeah.
So I can't really comment on it because I haven't actually looked it up. But
primary government sources are Department of Justice, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. Okay. And then the UN is the outside. And then you can go to the equivalents of those Department of Justice, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security. You can also get from Immigration Customs from them, or the U.S. Border Patrol. Both of those also have statistics of what they consider trafficked humans that are being brought across the border and the rates at which they're being brought across the border. So it's pretty unnerving.
Yeah, I just try to type it in really quickly, but the all I'm getting right now is the amount of people that have been caught or prosecuted for human trafficking in 2023 and 2022. I would have to type something else in, but I don't really want to do it while we're having this conversation. But I kind of wanted to switch gears, not completely away from the remote viewing thing, but a little bit more into UFOs and extraterrestrials here for a second. In 1947, because 1947, a lot of weird stuff happening in 1947. The Cold War started in 1947. All this weird things happening in 1947. You also have Kenneth Arnold's famous sightings in 1947 in Washington State, and you have the Roswell event in 1947. You have the National Security Act of 1947, which created a reorganization of foreign policy and the military establishments of the government. And the Air Force was born out of that National Security Act, along with the CIA and the DoD. All came out of this National Security Act of 1947, which I really feel like through the research that I've done, that 1947 really feels like a big turning point for the direction that the United States was going. And later the NSA was established, I believe, in 1952. And you have the Washington Flap event of 1952 with the UFOs over the White House. Then you have DARPA in 58, I believe. And that same year in NASA was formed, I believe, in 58. And the DIA in 61, and so on and so on. So, but it really feels like the infancy of a lot of government policy really came after World War II in 1947.
Did you want me to address that, or?
Well, just the way that you think of what was happening after World War II and how
Well,
a lot of these agencies came about after the war and pretty much in 1947. And then you have all these, all the events. You have the Roswell event in
I got it.
1947.
I got it. December 1945 is when it began. It was a guy by the name of the Army. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He was an Army Air Corps general, later a U.S. Air Force general. His name was Henry Arnold. He was a 4-star general. He worked with Dr. Theodore von Karman, and they put into motion, December of 1945, a written order for a 50-year vision of strategic intelligence operations in space. They actually established a U.S. Air Force Scientific Advisory Board and Project RAND with RAND Corporation. And what they did is they did this because the space war began in December of 1945. This particular general, along with others that were parts of the Joint Chiefs and their underlings in those Joint Chiefs, had gone, pure Clausewitz on this and decided, rightly so, that the nature of war will never change. Only the way in which war is fought and where war it will be fought will change. And they recognized that the next dimension of warfare that needed to be looked at very carefully and prepared for was the dimension of space. They had no idea about cyber war at that particular time. For crying out loud, December 1945, we were still flying around piston-driven airplanes. The only people that had jet aircraft were the Germans. So Eisenhower formed the National Aeronautics and Space Act, NASA, and he did that in 29 July of 1958, and he did that 10 months after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. Okay, so that's when that came about. Now, NASA was developed for a different reason than the space war. NASA had nothing to do with the space war. NASA, if you read back and look back and or remember any of those days, which I did because I was young, but young enough to know things that were going on, it was posed as a discovery and an exploration and a great humanitarian effort. That's what NASA was supposed to be. It was not part of the space war. It was part of the space race, which got everybody looking at a space race like, oh boy, we're all in this together. It could be the Soviets or it could be us, but hey, we're all going to, it's about getting man on the moon so we can, project discovery and exploration for human beings. That's why there's a sculpture on the moon. Did you know this?
Is it a plaque?
No, the plaque supports the structure. The actual sculpture itself is 3 inches tall, made out of brushed aluminum, which was done by an Eastern European sculptor, and it's entitled Fallen Astronaut. It was carried up there illegally by the mission commander of, I think, Apollo 15, and it was taken up there and put on there, and he got his ass in a big ringer for having done it because, hey, the space loads on board the aircraft are measured in grams and balanced appropriate.
Very meticulous.
They get only a personal pocket, personal stuff like a pocket-size envelope, and they're only allowed to put so many, ounces or grams in that envelope of things that they're going to take up there. But they were taking thousands of envelopes that were stamped by the NASA administration, postmarked to NASA for Apollo 15 going to the moon. So when they brought those back, these guys had this little cottage industry of selling crap. And they had made a promise to this artist that they were going to put his sculpture, Fallen Astronaut, on the moon, very close to the rover, and a plaque that was there that honored all the names of the fallen cosmonauts and U.S. astronauts that are on that plaque. So now the plaque and the fallen astronaut statue are there, but the U.S. government then launched this huge investigation into it. NASA did, because you're not supposed to do that, but they caught them doing it and spanked them pretty hard. And I don't think anybody that was on that mission ever flew another mission again. I think.
Anyway. Well,
I
know that there's someone buried on the moon too, right? The founder of astrology, I believe, Gene Shoemaker, his ashes was buried on the moon.
And who took his ashes up there?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Okay. I'm shaking my head like, nope. I'm shaking my head going, I had no idea. But hey, I just told you, that Gus Grissom was going to take dimes up, and did until he, the capsule bolts blew and the capsule sunk, and he kind of went down in shame and that before he got burned up later. But, hey, they were all doing that. And that's that industry right now of like space memorabilia. These guys make millions of dollars. I mean, millions of dollars. You have a pair of space gloves or a pair of boots or a helmet or anything else that went up or went on the moon and came back again, it's worth more money than, Croesus would have. It's just unbelievable.
It was carried up in July of 31. Gene Shoemaker, some of his ashes were carried to the moon by the Lunar Prospector space probe in a capsule designed by Caroline Porco. So it was carried up by a
NASA, then. It had to be. Was it private?
Provided the service at NASA's request. So I guess it was by NASA's request. Hold on, I can bring up the.
Look up that deeper, my friend, because that doesn't sound like something NASA would do. But hey, I don't know. What do I know about what NASA does?
Here's Eugene Shoemaker here. Death on July 31st, 1999. Some of his ashes were carried to the moon by Lunar Prospector space probe in a capsule designed by Caroline Porco. Provided this company right here, Celestius Inc. provided the service at NASA's request, commercially, making Shoemaker's ashes the first private delivery to the lunar surface. So yeah, it was done by a private company.
Yeah, I have to get back to you on that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It sounds fishy to me. But anyway, lots of weird crap has happened.
Hey, we just sent a private probe to the moon. Just landed on the moon.
Yeah, and some other guy put a car up there, huh? Not on the moon, but
it's just floating around in space up there, dude.
Yeah.
You didn't know?
But to carry your timeline there, it was in 61 that on 25 May 61 that President Kennedy actually stood before Congress. And this is an interesting thing. The title of his remarks to Congress were urgent national needs. And he was asking for $7 to $9 billion. He got $9 billion, 7 of which went to the space war effort. $2 billion went to NASA. And that was where he stated also, and around that time, that they were going to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, which would have been, 1970. And that was in 69. That's when Apollo 11 landed with Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin, and we put a man on the moon. But that was the space race, not the space war. The space war, which was going on behind all of that, which was much more sinister and macabre than what you might think, because we were in a freaking war. It was a war, and it still is a war. And, it was in 58, 7 months before Eisenhower. It's actually 24 January 1958, 7 months before Eisenhower established NASA, the Air Force Aeronautics Development Program that general had started with the PhD physicist, was submitted to the Defense Department, articulating 5 major systems that the Air Force wanted to pursue into space. First was weapons. Okay. So in 1956, they started the ballistic tests on related systems that they were going to put as weapons in space on platforms. They wanted manned hypersonic and unmanned hypersonic research to include space vehicles. They wanted an orbiter, bomber, inceptor, and reconnaissance variants. They wanted a U.S. Air Force crewed military strategic space station and they got all these. Okay. It was called Whiskey Sierra 117 Lima. And that space station occurred. I was in the Classified Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Geez, a long time ago now, like maybe 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. And I saw 4 U.S. Air Force astronaut uniforms hanging there in the area that had the Space Wars stuff, stuff that was now in the museum. That was where I found out, like in 1955, we were sending unmanned aerial reconnaissance drones over the Soviet Union in 55 and earlier. I didn't think we had drones until, that were operating like that until, well into the 60s or the 70s at the earliest. And I mean, I never even heard of them in a military application for like a infantry division, like an airborne division, until the Predator. And that was in like 91, 92, somewhere there in that time frame.
Would this command post be related, this airborne command post be related to the Operation Looking Glass that happened in 1961, which was by the Air Force to put a nuclear command post in space?
Yeah, it's the Lunix project. I think if you're talking about the idea to put, the idea was to put an actual manned weapons base nuclear weapons base on the moon. This is also part of the Space Wars project. So I can't name the projects for you. Projects come and go like toilet paper. They don't, you may see one stick, you may have one that gets released or something, but the thing that's important are the promulgating documents stated by the Air Force to the Department of Defense. This is what we're going to do. Whatever black project that they call it at the time being, could have 10 variants of that same objective, a black project under that. And those projects are named sometimes just to hide money. So you could get a project that might be called something and everybody thinks, oh my God, this is it. And this is what it's about. And if you ever get back to the project manager, the civilian that actually created it, oftentimes they'll say, yeah, I just needed a place to bury reconnaissance aircraft development. So I created this black project. And then we had 6 reconnaissance aircraft, in development in this thing. And out of the 6 that were in development under a black project, they may take 2 that they consider that are worthy of still being a black project, and those stay as a black project. And you will never know what those are. And it will get a different project name. And the other 4, which are now considered gray projects, then all of a sudden that project, project whatever book gets thrown out there. And then everybody's like, oh, now I know. No, you don't know. You know what they're letting you know is what you know. They're releasing it to you because it's now been declassified, because all of the projects that were being worked under when they were black are now gray. And so the 2 that are staying as black projects, which you don't know anything about, that's now under a new project. So when you find out about it, when it comes to you, when it's available to you to find or research somewhere, a photo or something else, unless it's a photo taken, at 200,000 feet where you see something going by somewhere up there that looks like something, and then people start calling it something, those are just freak photos that somebody captured, but you don't know what the project is. People will start matching how things look up to something else. And you have to go back to exactly what I just said. When they're working on, an unmanned drone aerial reconnaissance vehicle that will be in space, that will fly up 200,000 feet, 300,000 feet, and then drop down when they want it to, or skip across the atmosphere like a spark fire, or some of the other things that are up there, then what they'll do is the ones that work, the ones that test, the developers, like whether it's McDonnell Douglas or it's somebody else, JP Aerospace or whoever, has one that fails to work or doesn't meet the guidelines or doesn't meet their milestones, that now has become a gray project. That's when you'll see it you'll see it in Scientific American or Popular Mechanics, or you'll see it and you'll read all kinds of stuff, whatever it is they choose to tell you or let you know about it. And you might find out what project that happened to have been listed under when it was black. But if you find out what that project is, it's no longer a black project. The next black project will be so dug down, and the ones that are going forward, right?
Yeah.
You won't find out the real ones.
Yeah, and they do that on purpose. It's done
course.
for a reason. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your 99-cent super sticker and your support of the show. Really appreciate you, brother. So you were talking about military drones earlier, and you said, I believe you said 45, you were aware of military drones. Is that correct?
45.
55?
December of 45 is when the space war began with the Soviet Union and China, although China, at that particular point in time was still eating dirt soup. So there wasn't much they were doing, right, in terms of being viable as an enemy. I mean, they didn't show up on a battlefield for us or against us until Korea, which was, early 50s. But 45, they were not a space, they were not a contender for space. But it didn't, in fact, the Chinese, I don't think, joined the space war program until 1970, 24 April 1970. They put up an artificial satellite.
So Rick wants to know what's going on with the dark side of the moon, Dave. Tell us what's back there, bro. Are there buildings back there? Are there giant reptilian bases on the backside of the moon, Dave? Let us know. Tell us what's going on.
What I know. It's dark back there. And we can't see back there. You're assuming it as a remote viewer. I looked back there, but no, I have not. That you would have to go to Ingo Swann for. You can read some of his stuff on there. Maybe Ed Dames or like a half dozen others that have said that they've looked on the backside of the moon. But I, on the other hand, did not. So
you didn't look at any other planets or anything like that?
Yeah, but we're trying to talk facts here, not anecdotal stories based on an experience. I mean, I can't prove any of those things. I mean, I can't prove that what 23,000 remote viewers looking at into the Olympus Mons, lava tubes and underground craters and things. If I come back and tell you that out of 23,000 of them, 19,000 of them saw a city the size of Manhattan in there. Is there a correlation of the data? Yeah, but it's a correlation. But is it anything but anecdotal? No, it isn't. It's just correlated data, but you can't present that as an absolute. I would never stand up and say that to people like, oh yeah, I know that these things exist there. No, I don't know that. And I can't prove it, so I won't say it. So
that makes a lot of sense. There's a large group of people within the community that say that the Far Side Institute, about the Far Side Institute, Dave? They're like the Far Side Institute remote viewed it, and it turns out that it's real. Like I hear that excuse like all the time when it comes to extraterrestrial entities, bases on military bases on other planets and all that. So speak about the Far Side Institute really quickly so we can try and get that out of the way.
Courtney Brown used to be I met him many times. How I met him was he was writing a book called Cosmic Voyage, I believe, with Ed Dames. And in typical, I don't actually think it was Ed Dames that did these things. I think it was Ed Dames's girlfriend or his wife at the time that was, putting words in his mouth. I mean, from everything I heard from Mel Riley and stuff, that if anybody was talking to him on the phone, that she was like standing next to him, listening and then telling him or writing him notes about what to say. So I'm sorry that that's how, things became in his life, because that wasn't how he was when I knew him in the unit. I think he's a very intelligent, highly intelligent man. And I just don't know where this Dr. Doom bullshit came in, but I know what caused it. And this is part of that story. So I know with Courtney Brown and Cosmic Voyage, Courtney Brown had taken a single class with Ed. And then they were working these, Cosmic Voyage alien ET projects together, which meant now you had a monitor, which was Ed, working with Courtney, who was a professor at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. writing this book, Cosmic Voyage, and I, as I said, there was a falling out between the two of them. And Courtney, told me one time on the phone, he goes, so I just said to Ed, it's like, I'm pulling you out of the book. And Ed was like, you can't do that. And Courtney was like, yeah, I can. It's Word, Microsoft Word. It's called search and replace. So he just searched and replaced and pulled James's name out of the book and put in remote viewer. And there that is. Now, past that point, the issue here is that you have a guy who is not necessarily a scientist. He is an academic, but he took one class, and he took a class from Ed Dames that was heavily laden with aliens and UFO stuff. And that is the direction that Courtney has gone for a very long time. And I'll tell you one of the things that happened, if you'll remember, there was a group once upon a time. I hate telling this story, but it's a good story to tell. Remember the Art Bell show, and when Art Bell was alive, there was the comet Hale-Bopp was coming.
Yes, they were responsible for a bunch of nonsense. Continue, yes.
So the comet Hale-Bopp is coming in, and so Art Bell, is talking to Courtney Brown that night on the Art Bell show, and suddenly, something comes across the fax or in an email. Don't know exactly how, but it's a photograph of Hale-Bopp, and it is from allegedly, a professional astronomer who said, we have this picture of Hale-Bopp, and if you look into the tail of Hale-Bopp, you'll see that there's a visible object moving in the tail of the comet Hale-Bopp. We were just wondering if, Courtney Brown could use his Farsight Institute, and if they could look at this and let us know what is there. So that's what Courtney Brown does. I guess a couple of weeks go by or something, and they come back again. And then coming back, he presents this whole laydown of how his Farsight Institute saw this object in the tail of Hale-Bopp and concluded that it was, in fact, a mothership, and that it was a mothership moving in the tail, and that it was coming by planet Earth to pick up people from planet Earth, or words to that effect. And so, unbeknownst to any of the players that I just laid out for you, there's a cult group in out in San Clemente area. San Diego area.
Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate. And the living leader of Heaven's Gate takes 31 people and says that you heard it on Art Bell, because they all listened to Art Bell and they all watched Star Trek, every time it was on. So when this being said, they decided to commit mass suicide because, their leader, Doe or T, was now going to take all of them and lead them as they died in shifts. These away teams were going to go link up with this mothership, where they could link up with T or Doe, whichever one was there. T or Doe. The leaders, male and female, T and Doe. I can't remember which one was which. But the remaining one says they're going to go link up with the other one on the mothership. So they start offing themselves. Well, while they're offing themselves horribly, the exchange continues on the Art Bell show, as this is pronounced. At some other time, while they're still offing, where this astronomer allegedly comes back and says who they are, and that this was a faked photograph, that the photograph had been altered, and that there was no object in it, and that they were just using this episode to prove how bad Courtney Brown and the Farsight Institute were with all of these things. Now, the rumor in the inside channel within the remote viewing community was that the astronomer was Ed and or Ed's accomplices in his company that was there under, basically the tyranny of whoever he was with at that particular point in time, just to set Courtney Brown up. All of them, of course, just ignorant of what the consequences would have been, but also just not in it, so selfish in that process and not actually thinking that you say something like that there may be some people that are gullible enough and injured enough that they might just take what you're saying as truth and go, commit mass suicide, which is what happened. But that never got
into the next evolutionary level above human is what the Heaven's Gate called. I did a whole series on it. Now, welcome to the show says Art Bell never made those comments, and he says that you always pitch that. I don't know what comments he made or what he didn't make, but I'm pretty certain that it did have to do with Art Bell's show.
It was on Art Bell's show.
I don't know what Art Bell said about it, but it did happen on Art Bell's show. That's factual. Yep. Now, regardless of if he said that there really was I don't know exactly what he said, but it did happen on the show. Now, he might not have said, "Oh, there's for sure a mothership behind the tail of the comment," but he had the people on the show that did say that there was a mothership behind the comment.
Yes, that's sir. All I want to hear about that. I don't address comments. I don't get in a pissing contest with the gallery. Okay. So you don't agree with that, then don't agree with it. I could not care less.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the Far Side Institute, and people like to use their, I guess this gets into a question is, how does remote viewing actually work? Because there's a large group of people, remote viewers that say that they can just look at a picture of something and they're like able to remote view it, or if they know the target of the remote, what they're going to see, then they can remote view it. But that's not how remote viewing works, right? You just can't know what you're remote viewing and then get accurate information, correct?
Well, no, because then you'd be front loaded and then that would not be blind or double blind. So therefore that would be the process of your own imagination, right?
Yeah, because then you get your preconceived notions and you can receive it from memory.
It would be nothing but anecdotal and experiential. There would be nothing empirical about what you're producing.
Yeah, but there's a large group of claimed remote viewers, people that claim that they can remote view, right? Which is hundreds and hundreds of people like that, like the people that claim to remote view the Miami Mall, right? Dozens of those YouTubers on YouTube that remote viewed the aliens at the Miami Mall. I was like, well, how did you remote view the aliens at the Miami Mall if you knew that that's what you were remote viewing?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, like
you
it doesn't.
You can't do it. I mean, it's like, look, it goes back to what we were I thought we were going to talk about tonight, which was the rise of the con man. But we're going down different rabbit holes at this particular juncture. And if you're asking me, I've said it many thousands of times that you can't, I can go back to the rules of remote viewing, and they're very simple. It's not 100% accurate. It never has been, and it never will be. Okay. That's rule number one. Rule number two, you never trust the results of a single remote viewer operating independently of other remote viewers. Why? Because of rule number one. So why would you trust, if you already know it's not 100% accurate, never has been, never will be, why would you use one remote viewer to tell you the answer to something, right? And rule number three is remote viewing was never intended to be used as a standalone endeavor. That means it was always used in consonance with other intelligence collection methodologies, which is why if you try to take a position and say, well, it didn't work and it never produced actionable intelligence, the same could be said of signal intelligence, of photo intelligence, of sat intelligence, particularly of human intelligence. I mean, let's face it, we invaded Iraq based on two sources of human intelligence. So human intelligence, none of the sources of human intelligence, which there only used to be 7, they're actually somewhere in a number of like 39 different intelligence collection methodologies in use right now. And when remote viewing was being used, which I believe that it still is being used, that it would hold its own against all of the other intelligence collectors, because for those that don't know this and can't figure it out, none of them are 100% accurate. And if none of them are 100% accurate, that's the reason why there are so many of them now. Every other methodology that they could possibly create to create one more picture of the intelligence puzzle. And that's what they do. And that's how they do it. And that's why it's put together that way. And that's why remote viewing was never a standalone thing. No, nobody ever filled up a helicopter with a bunch of Delta Force and Rangers and took down a target somewhere because of only remote viewers. However, back in during the failed Iranian hostage rescue attempt, remote viewers played one of the more significant roles in the development of intelligence in support of that failed exercise. But the failed exercise that failed mission was failed at Desert One because helicopters all went down because they just weren't made to fly under those kinds of conditions. And so the air mission commander shut down the air operation, meaning they had to load everybody back up on the C-130s and what 2 working aircraft they had out of, I think, 9 or 10, and get them, exfilled out of the area. That's the reason that went down. And then a helicopter drifts after it browns out when it takes off because they had shitty 2nd generation night vision goggles on, because that's all we had at the time. And they drifted into a C-130 tanker filled with Delta and it exploded. Now, but back when they were planning the mission, they didn't have any of the floor plans of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. They didn't have any of those floor plans. I find that to be an astounding oversight for the U.S. State Department not to have the floor plans of the embassies, around the world, but they didn't. I guess they just didn't think that way, that somebody might ever take one down. But they didn't know where stairwells were. They didn't know which way doors opened. They didn't know where they might be keeping the hostages. They didn't know, what kind of locking devices or what kinds of, the doors look like necessarily on the outside. They had some satellite imagery, but they didn't have the kind of that they have nowadays. They just didn't have that. So the 2 primary sources of intelligence, other than human intelligence and sources, which could only get limited visuals on it, because their Republican Guard that were there had the place cordoned off, and they were quite brutal. And they weren't letting, spectators in to get a look around and draw sketches, or try to remember things or take pictures. None of that was allowed. So Ted Koppel was one of the guys that had access to the place and was doing, was not Republican Guards, Iranian Guards, the students that had overthrown the embassy there at the behest of Ayatollah Khomeini. They had, Ted Koppel was there interviewing them. And in interviewing them, they were positioning the camera in certain ways to kind of look past the interview, past Ted Koppel, and be able to give the analysts a view down the hallways to see how people were coming out of doors and things like that. But they didn't know they knew there were some bulletproof windows, but they didn't know where the bulletproof windows were. There was just a lot of ignorance about what was going on there. The next thing that happened was, they used remote viewers to look, because if they, as it was said by a former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, I don't care if it's only 6% accurate, if it's 6% accurate information, that I can't glean by any other means that it's intelligence dollars well spent. So the whole point was that, hey, maybe we aren't able to prove whether it's, what the accuracy of it is, but if the data correlates from the viewers that are doing it, then we want to see it, and we want to at least consider it, and how we're going to plan this operation and where we're going to land. And I mean, they had things like, they had them looking at targets like, the stadium where they were going to land the helicopters, and then assault, directly to the embassy from that stadium, which was not far away, but they had them pulling out crew-served weapons and indicating where crew-served weapons were. The remote viewers now. That's who was doing that. So all of that was being produced by the remote viewers and being used in consonance with whatever other intelligence they could get, including that was coming from the Ted Koppel news show that was there, being held there. And that's how they were planning that operation. I mean, was based on that. Certainly there were other pieces of information that came in through other sources, but those were the two primaries that they had, you know, at least according to Delta and the Rangers. And my former first sergeant was in the Rangers during that operation. So
Dana D asks, what's the difference between remote viewers and psychic mediums who can view different realms, in your opinion, of course, Dave?
I'll say it again. Remote viewing is a discipline, a dogma that was designed for the intelligence community. That's what remote viewing is. I can't tell you what psychics do. I'm not psychic. I don't never claim to be psychic, not psychic. I'm a remote viewer. I was trained to be a remote viewer. I work for the intelligence service doing that. So what a psychic does and invents on their own. They come up with their own process, their own whatever, and they claim accuracy or not, or how they pitch it to somebody. It either is or it isn't. There can be, at least by some analyses and takes on it, a lot of trickery and a lot of different kinds of things that go on with it. And I'm sure there are probably some people who are very gifted clairvoyants. But what they do and what remote viewers do are completely at opposite ends of the spectrum. What remote viewers do, if they're doing it the way it's supposed to be done, operating under the rules that I just articulated for you, they don't get out there and take tests. They don't do things. They don't get engaged in dog and pony shows and parlor tricks and, you know, those kinds of things. What they do, they work for either the transformational experience of what happens when you get to the place where you no longer believe that there's something beyond the physical, but you now know it. And you know that through doing the work in both the physical and the non-physical realm. So that's a transformative experience. Beyond that point, I get asked that question, well, what am I going to do with it? Well, you know what? How about first you get transformed to where you're no longer wishing or hoping or believing that there's something beyond the physical. And you're usually, you know, not part of the 76% who believe that there is, but don't believe that you'll ever realize it or that you'll ever recognize it or be part of it. How about you step into the realm of doing the work to where you get to the point where you now know it? Big difference between believing something and knowing it. Everybody here believes something, right? There's a difference when you know something. So you have to do that. And now that's probably the best explanation I can give you.
Rick says, funny thing is, we're all remote viewing this live stream right now. Wow, that's true. Kind of are remotely viewing it. We're not in the same room. It's pretty interesting. Jenna says, some remote viewers make the best palm readers. That is a completely different thing, Jenna, but thank you for your comment. Gesture, only 1% of psychics are legit. Look for the ones who do not ask for a fee or a donation. Yeah, I haven't.
Wonder where that study came from.
That's right. Good.
Does that go to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Comments, Rick. Dana says, thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not a better explanation. It's a lot of moving pieces in that explanation. And I say it so many thousands of times, a year that you start to really feel like you're pulling a repeat, on some of those things, which is why I really like to come in and talk about other things other than remote viewing. But
Absolutely, but it's been a little bit since you've been on, so I wanted to kind of give a little remote viewing refresher there for people. Now, we just had Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. Did you see Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's article? I was talking to, he was the head of Aero, that basically came out and said that all of the UFOs and the UAPs that people are seeing are military drones.
Well, again, you know, if somebody's talking in terms of absolutes, that always causes me to balk. But look, that was my whole space war, space race, you know, podcast, which has now been done like 3 times. That whole space war, space race podcast points out, you know, I think I've taken the position and I've said anywhere from, you know, I think I was on your show. I think it was on your show that we had 2 guys that were, you know, intel community guys that were saying that they believe that somewhere like 92 or 93% of what is being reported are all, you know, part of the space war issue. And I said, I think that's a very conservative number. I would submit it's probably closer to 96 and 98%. Because if you understand the pure magnitude of the space war and the space war as it is now being managed by China and by Russia, with North Korea in a very small way playing, and also with Iran looking for a way to play. Maybe not with manned vehicles, but certainly the idea of putting up weapons and or reconnaissance capabilities. If you look at a direct correlation, and there is a direct correlation, I don't think I can show this to you. I don't know if I can put this in here. Can I drop this in the chat? Let's just see. Oops, says it can.
All right.
It dropped in it said I could drop it in chat and then just disappeared. So I don't know how you can see this.
You can hit present at the bottom of the screen and then share screen, and then you can go to the window or whatever, any tab that you would like to share, and then click it and then hit share.
All right, let me just see if I can do that. I'm not familiar with this particular platform. I see setting a present. Okay, so hit present. There,
hit present, share screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have 3 monitors, so is it going to ask me which screen that I want to share?
It should just come up the tab. You can do the window. It has like, you can share the window. That should be the different tabs or the different, it should all populate on the one thing, no matter how many screens you got.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I can't. It's like I hate this platform, man. It's just like the most annoying platform in the world. I just have to say to you,
it's actually the easiest if you know how to work it. Work it, Dave.
Working it.
Very simple.
So I don't think it's sharing it here for you. So, but can you see this? Is it showing a screen here now? No, it's not showing a screen.
No.
Let me see if I can pull it up here. If that's the screen, it's going to show it. No. So let me see. Because first of all, it's like freaking thing.
Well, do you have the thing populated on the screen? Like you have to have the document or whatever that you want to share already popped up on the screen, and then when you hit present, go screen share, and then you can click the tab. Well, he's gone. He left. Jenna Banana, how's it going? Just me right now, Rick. Jenna, how's it going? Savagely, good to see you, my friend. Dave can't figure out the freaking screen share function on StreamYard. There we are. He's back. Made it back. Yeah, we're just gonna have to cancel out on that one. I don't.
Yeah, it's not worth it. I mean, but if you could see it, I mean, if there were a way to show it, this is an ESRI UFO sightings since 1904. So all of you can go look at that. That's ESRI UFO sightings since 1904. Now, look at the UFO sightings, because what'll happen is it's a movie and you play it and it will run for 48 seconds. And in the 48 seconds, it will traverse the timeline from 1904 until 2023. I said that the space war began in 1945, December of. To answer the very first question you asked, Ryder, and everybody else has commented on in various ways, watch the timeline slide with ESRI's UFO UAP sightings and see when the lights start to light up. Okay? Because what you'll find is it starts in 1904 or 1945. And oh, yes, I know. Yeah, there were sightings in 1620. I got it. Remember, I didn't say that there aren't any alien races or vehicles or civilizations. What I said to you is that 96 to 98% of what you're seeing and reporting are nothing more than either gray or black projects that are part of the space program. It's part of the space war program, not part of NASA, part of the space war program. We were flying and testing lifting body aircraft by 1965 and 1968. If you don't know what lifting body aircraft means, it means aircraft that don't have wings. They were test flying them. They had test pilots flying them at Edwards Air Force Base, out in the desert. And so they've been working on that stuff since 1965, 1968. Some guy just published a book that shows some of the vehicles that they were working on. I mean, show some of the vehicles they were test flying on. And that was in 65, 68. So think where they are now with lifting body aircraft. And when you see pictures of lifting body aircraft now, just understand you're looking at something gray. You're not looking at anything black. So if you're looking at the gray, you're just looking at what they're allowing you to see at this point. Like they don't care. Or as long as you're paying attention to that, then you're not paying attention to the black project, which is kind of right up their alley. But just go to ESRI. It's a website, esri.com, I believe. Look for USO sightings as of 1904. Actually, I think it goes to 2014, but just take a look at it. See what you think then. We're knowing that the space war began in 1945. I think you might find it interesting.
Are these lifting body aircrafts that you're mentioning able to be piloted by an individual, or are these just 100% drones?
The issue is that you have subsonic, supersonic, and hypersonic flight. Remember, as I said to you, that by 1948, 47, we're presenting to DOD that they wanted manned and unmanned hypersonic flight. The challenge with manned hypersonic flight is it's hard enough to manage hypersonic flight. But the issue is that if you have human beings in a hypersonic aircraft and you start to go up, the unmanned drones, some of them have hypersonic speeds of 23,000 knots. I mean, contemplate that. 18,000 knots. I mean, it's phenomenal what they're doing. And that's really nothing compared to what they can do when they get up into space. But their reentry speeds and their exit speeds can be upwards of those. And you can't put human beings in that. You can't, the bodies couldn't stand the G-forces that they would have for something like that. They could for the reentry, as long as it was a straight descent or something like that. But most of these craft the military is moving towards as much autonomous, AI driven, non-manned, warships, warplanes, fighter planes, reconnaissance planes. And they've been after that now for quite some time. And they've been doing it for at least 2.5 decades, if not more, actually closer to 3 decades. Why are they doing it? Because you train a pilot, you're training a semi-superhuman to be capable of doing something, right? I mean, you drag them through the academy or through some other source to get them to that place. You put them through that kind of training, and then you make them a fighter pilot. And you know, you have to feed them, you have to water them, you have to keep them trained, you have to keep them current, you have to pay them a salary, you have to take care of their dependent wife, their dependent children. You know, you've got to do all those things. And when they retire from the Air Force, you have to pay them retirement. And if they get sick, you have to pay them, you know, VA has to pay them to take care of them, which it's all noble and good. But hey, the government's of the ilk at this particular point that, hey, if we can put a machine in there, a computer that thinks on its own and does things within the parameters we establish, then why the hell aren't we doing it? Now, look, if you ask my opinion, like if I were master of the universe, I would say like, yeah, I'm not really cool on that. You know, I think could be some problems that arise out of that. And I don't have a good sense or feeling for it. It could just be my ignorance of it. My point is that it should be looked at very carefully, and there should be, again, as I said earlier, where you guys are all wrong, you know, worried about the wrong things. That people should be worrying about that kind of stuff and worrying about how you're going to manage that and maintain it, and as best as a people can. You know, through our elected officials, there should be really some careful looking at this, because it is a dangerous proposition, in my opinion. It can potentially get away from us. And if it gets away from us, then what are you going to do? I can't say that it can cognate faster than a human, but it can't, because it really can't. But it can certainly learn faster. And if it can learn faster, then it can outthink you, even though it can't cognate and outrun your neural clock speed. That's kind of been proven. So it can't outrun your neural clock speed, but it's still, you're putting an autonomous decision maker that is a computer in intelligence that's linked to all other things that are flying up there with it, so that it has a drone mentality. I mean, it has a hive mentality, if you will. And it's going to go against another hive mentality. It's going to be fighter aircraft that can pull, you know, as many G's as it can pull and keep the skin on the aircraft, you know, and fly at hypersonic flight and go up and down and use new exotic propulsion systems that have been in the works for 50, 60 years now. I mean, electromagnetic drives and beyond. And then you always have some smart guy steps up and goes, "Oh, those are ridiculous. Those patents are ridiculous." Oh, then let me rephrase. The patents you're looking at that I just might have showed you as an example, those are patents that have been obviously declassified, which means they're not even maybe part of a gray project, maybe not part of any project anymore. The point is, you know, that people have been patenting and working on these things for 30 and 40 and 50 years. They've been working on this stuff. And I don't know of anything other than, you know, plasma drives, you know, fusion. I don't know anything other than fusion that humans been working on for 50 years and have not yet quite, you know, nailed it down. I think you talk about fusion and you understand fusion energy production and fusion drives. I mean, for 50 years, they've been going, yeah, well, we're 20, 30 years out. So, I mean, for 50 years, they've been saying the same thing. So now you still ask them the question, you're like, yeah, 30 to 30 years out, probably before we ever, you know, fully master it. Fascinating, you know, form of, of energy, not one that could be readily adapted into a weapon of war. But, you know, that you're going to see fission drives are going to be out there, and they're coming up with all kinds of other exotic drives that are going to be out there and be using them, and they are there. So I think that the long answer to that question is the vast majority of what you're seeing, flying around that makes your mouth drop open or causes some airline pilot or even a fighter pilot to go, "I've never seen anything like that. Never seen anything with those kinds of flight characteristics." No, you have not. Because just because you're a pilot in the United States Air Force flying, the fastest aircraft that they happen to make does not mean that they brief you on a black project or 6 black projects or 106 black projects. In fact, they never will brief you on those projects. If you take a picture, if your backseater takes a picture and they come back, they'll either decide, is that a gray project or is it a project we really need to seriously, confiscate that photo and not let it out, which that probably wouldn't get very far. They're very good at protecting that stuff. Very good at it.
But Dave, it's got to be aliens because I don't know what it is. Come on.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that happen. You know, there's a lot of stuff that contributes to this, just the ignorance of things that happen. You know, it's like there's always this idea that, you know, everything's got to be leaked. You know, you just get so sick of hearing that. It's been leaked, you know. And it's like some guys leaked this or leaked that. It's a leaked memorandum talking about, you know, aliens. And no, it's not. It's not leaked. Jesus, you stupid. And the Pentagon, if it doesn't say top secret at the top or secret at the top, and if every paragraph in it is not classified, because that's what a secret document looks like. Every paragraph is classified, each paragraph, because what's in that paragraph may not be top secret. It might only be secret, or it might only be something else, but as it works its way down. But every paragraph is classified. So when it just is a standard memorandum that talks about something that you brought up at the table dealing with UFOs, then it's just sheer buffoonery to call that a leaked memorandum. Pentagon produces probably 10 million memorandums a day. You know, everybody who talks to somebody comes back and makes a memorandum for record. That's what it is called. And it's date and timed. And on this date, these people came to my office, you know, by our invitation or authorization, and talked about these things. And this is what they said. This is what I said. And signed by the officer that did the interview or the non-commissioned officer. And then that memorandum goes to their boss. And if it had anything to do with UFOs, I assure you, if it went to one guy's boss about something like that, it probably didn't last 10 seconds before it hit the waste can. You know, they weren't going to seal it. They weren't. But the idea that it got leaked was just asinine. That's somebody trying to make an issue out of nothing, who then goes and says, hey, man, can I get a copy of that memorandum? It's not classified, and it's not even confidential, you know, to the officer who typed it up. It's an unclassified, non-confidential memorandum just documenting your trip, what you asked, and what I said. Sure, here's a copy via email. Oh, it's leaked now. So, you know,
Well, that's a way to put people within the community to make it seem like that they have something that other people don't have, right? It puts them on a pedestal. Like if they have leaked information from the Pentagon or whatever, it's just a saying that these people say in order to try and bolster themselves up to make it seem like they know what they're talking about, is what I've found.
yeah, you're correct. It is exactly why they do that, because they get purchase out of it, right? They get people to follow and believe, and, you know, put them up on some pedestal, you know, as something special. And the people who do it become very callous about doing and very nonchalant about. They could care less. They don't care whether, you know, because they understand that 15 minutes of fame is what they're after and what they're going to get. And they also understand the vast number of people are never going to follow up on it to see whether it's right or it was wrong. All they have to do is say it. If they say it, it's right. But it comes out of everything that you see. It's like this photograph that this Navy pilot, his backseater, takes a picture. They see something come, it's in front of them, and they think it's, you know, they've never seen the silhouette of that type of a craft. So the backseater pulls out his iPhone, takes a picture, you know, and it's all over YouTube or all over the internet, and it's titled as it's a spacecraft UAP photo, you know, taken by U.S. Navy backseater's iPhone, and it's described as hovering in the air, and every reference to that photo is as a leaked photo, but it wasn't leaked. It wasn't leaked because it wasn't a classified photo. It wasn't anything that anybody cared about anybody seeing. It was actually a picture taken at about a mile out of an aircraft that is it's called Dream Chaser, and it actually has a reentry speed of about 16,000 miles per hour. That's greater than Mach 20, just so you can know that. And it's unmanned. And you take that picture, and then you know, position that picture so you're actually looking at the bottom side of the Dream Chaser about a mile out, you know. And first of all, you have no idea what that silhouette is. it's one of the lifting body craft that doesn't look like it has any wings. What it looks like it has is vertical stabilizers, but you can't really even see those. And what you engage in, what that pilot engages in, which is why they said that it looks like it was floating, like it was standing still, is because even if you're in the fastest jet that they have, right? Even if you're in that fastest jet and something comes in at 16,000 miles per hour, 16 knots, you know, greater than Mach 20, and it's a mile away from you, descending like that, and you're up in the air at what in the photo looks to be like 30,000 feet, like you're airliner height. You have no static reference point. So you experience what's called spatial disorientation. Spatial disorientation during flight operations. If you're a pilot like I am, if you read the FAA manuals, the FAA manual talks about it. It's called autokinetic illusion. And in instrument flight, like when you're making an approach at night and you're looking out at a runway, particularly if you're like in a desert area. So military pilots can experience this a lot. You happen to look out, they can see the runway lights, but they don't see other lights because they're landing at in a military airfield and maybe running a military operation as they're doing it. It's a mission rehearsal. And they get this autokinetic illusion, which means that the runway appears to keep just moving in front of them. So they get spatial disorientation. It's freaky. It's a vertigo-like sensation because the runway looks like it just keeps going. And the reason that happens is because you don't know relative velocity in a surfaceless environment. You're 31,000 feet in the air flying in a jet, fast-moving jet, and you see something out in front of you, it appears to stand still in the air because you can't see its relative velocity. There's nothing to compare it to. There are no telephone poles, no mountains, no clouds. There's just nothing but, you know, the sky above and the ground so far below that you can't measure the velocity. You can barely measure velocity if you look down. So the only thing the pilot has for him to know velocity is to know his own velocity by looking at his instrument panel. And it is an absence of a static reference point that causes him to be able to differentiate whether that thing is staying directly in front of him, whether it's hovering, or whether it's even coming back out at him. They can't really tell unless it passed them or something like that. But when it just keeps there and you're going at, you know, Mach 3, you know, let's say in a F-15EX or something, yeah, you're going just under Mach 3 and something else is just over Mach 20 and it's a mile away, no static reference point, it looks to you like it's hovering in the air. It's a common phenomenon, but hey, nobody analyzes that. They just all make the comment that, yeah, it's, you know, it was standing still in the air and it's a leaked photo, neither of which was true.
That's incredible. I didn't know that about the pilots, that they would experience something similar to what you're describing, like an optical illusion almost.
Autokinetic illusion. Yeah. It's right in the FAA manual. And it happens because you have no static reference point, you cannot establish relative velocity of that object in relation to you. So it looks like it's standing still, right? Or just leading out in front of you and standing there. So
awesome, Dave. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time this evening. Glad we got to do it. It's been I've been planning it for over a month now, and I'm glad we got to get it together and come on here and have an amazing conversation. Can you let people know where to find you online?
Yeah, it's just go to davidmorehouse.org. That is the official website. I don't own the other one, the davidmorehouse.com, and I do not endorse what is on there, but just go to davidmorehouse.org and you can find me there and find where I'm at and what I'm doing. There's a link there to the YouTube channel. It's not a monetized YouTube channel. It's just a listing of all my stuff, you know, that's there. So you can go there and throw darts at things, you know, you can do whatever you want to do.
Thanks so much, Dave. The links to all of Dave's information is in the description of this video. Thanks ever so much, everyone in the chat. Really appreciate you guys. Love all you guys, and please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And I will be traveling next week for about 5 days to shoot me and Jay Widener's second documentary. So I will not have any shows next week. So this one will be the last one for the next week. So I'll see you guys back when I see you guys back. All right. Thank you, guys.
Let me say thank you, and let me say how much I respect you and your work. So good for you.
Thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate your time this evening. And all of his links are in the description of this video. All right. See you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.